the name of our workshop is Impact of Societal Change on University Continuing Education. And it's organized by eucen and Utrecht University. So big thanks to them first. And we have 3 presentations altogether. So we have approximately half an hour for each topic. And I have asked the presenters to present their topic approximately 15 to 20 minutes, and then have a short discussion on each topic after each presentation. And for others, please feel free to use chat for questions during the presentation. And of course, after the presentation, there is also time to point out your own experiences or ask questions on live as well. So first, we have presentations. Actually, first 2 presentations are from Austria, from Danube University Krems, and another one from UK, from University of Huddersfield. So, okay, let's start first with the first presentation, and I would like to give floor to Christina Ipser and Gregor Radinger from the Department for Building and Environment. Please, can you share your screen, or would you like me to share your presentation?
Thank you, Ülle. I will try to share my screen. If you give me a minute. Yes. Can you see my presentation already? Fine. Okay. Yes. Okay. I think we will have to keep this short now, which will be a little hard since we like to talk about this topic. Yes, our presentation is about the experiences of adult learners in continuing education in the physical learning space. Okay, I have to move a little on my screen. Yes, and before I actually start our presentation, I would like to invite you to remember your personal student days, especially the physical learning environment of your student days. And maybe you want to think of your, if you studied at a university or college, of your university buildings, to think of the lecture halls, the seminar rooms, classrooms, maybe also the hallways, library spaces, and campus outdoor spaces or outdoor spaces near the university buildings. And I guess that most of you were a little younger when you studied, and you probably did not have a full-time job, and maybe you did not have family with childcare obligation and so on, and you did not have the life experience and professional experience which you have now. And I want you now to imagine to go back to this learning environment, this physical learning environment, maybe to do some kind of continuing education. And I believe that you would experience this learning environment quite different from your today's perspective, with your today's experience. And this is actually what our study we want to present today is about. We wanted to get a better insight in how adult learners in academic continuing education experience the physical learning environment on a university campus. I found this statistic which says that in 2016, about 44% of people in the European Union aged between 25 and 64 participated in some kind of education or training. And about 5% took part in some kind of formal education. So in a very rough estimation, that would mean that in 2016, we had about 100 million adult learners in the European Union and about 10 million adult learners in some kind of formal education. And I guess that these numbers will be rising, or maybe they have already increased. And these adult learners, they need learning environments, different kind of learning environments. Of course, social and cultural learning environments. Nowadays, they also need virtual learning environments, but they do also need some kind of physical learning environments. And this is why we started our LIS project a few years ago at Danube University. And I'm very glad that Marieke van der Schaaf already explained why we chose this fresco from Raphael as a logo for our project. The project was called Learning and Innovation Spaces for Continuing Education. And it was funded by an internal grant of the Danube University with the idea to establish cross-disciplinary research groups. And within this project, we worked together with researchers from different disciplines. Gregor and me, we are architects, and we work together with education researchers, with psychologists, with communication scientists, and so on, with the aim to get a better understanding on how learning and innovation spaces for continuing education are supposed to be designed. Actually, there is already quite a lot of research dealing with the interaction of the physical learning environment with the learning experience, with learning performance, with students and also teachers' well-being. And of course, there is a strong interrelation between learning spaces and didactical approaches. And there's also, this is also researched quite well. But most of this existing research is focusing on children and young adults in school environments or higher education environments. And yet there is not much research actually dealing with how learning environments for adults are supposed to be. This is one of the reasons why within the LIS project we did a case study at the Danube University in Krems. Danube University is a university for continuing education, so we do have only postgraduate programs, and our students are on average about 40 years old. Usually they study part-time, most of them are working full-time while they are studying, and most of them bring several years of professional experience to their learning activities. And we did this case study during a 1-week learning module called Cognition and Creativity with 14 students from different continuing education master programs. And we did it in December 2019. So this was before the pandemic started and changed almost everything in the education system. Yes, the idea was to explore adult students' experiences of the physical campus learning spaces at our campus in Krems. And we chose quantitative and qualitative approaches. Amongst others, we worked with a questionnaire to explore students' expectations and satisfaction regarding, for example, different indoor environmental quality characteristics, also regarding the availability of different spaces for different learning activities on the campus or spaces which are related to their well-being, and also their expectations and satisfaction regarding the campus environment and accessibility. And we also conducted walking interviews with the aim to get a better insight to their perception and their use of different spaces in the campus learning environment. Gregor, can you take over here?
Yes, thank you, Tina. Yeah, dear colleagues, after Tina's introduction, I want to focus on the geographical and spatial context of the Danube University. The Danube University is located in Lower Austria in a region that is called the Wachau. And the Wachau is a listed UNESCO World Heritage Site due to its cultural and landscape features. You can see here a view on the village of Spitz on the northern bank of the river Danube within really very beautiful wine yards. And if we now focus on the campus of the Danube University, that is on the next slide here, a bird's eye view on the campus of the Danube University near the medieval city center of Krems. You can also see a little bit the river Danube. The campus of the Danube University has about 34,000 square meters for 8,000 students that are currently registered at the Danube University. And if we now focus inside the campus, you see that the building stock of the university mainly consists of an old historical building. It's the old and former Austrian tobacco factory that was erected in the 1920s and was transformed to a university in the 1990s. You can see it on the left-hand side of the picture, and on the right-hand side of the picture, you see a new and quite modern building extension planned by the Austrian architect Dietmar Fechtinger and opened in 2005. The next slide displays a site plan of the campus with the modern building extension on the north, in the north area of the campus, and the old building in the southern part of the campus. Let's now step inside the building and let's have a look at the spatial and architectural characteristics of learning spaces in the old and in the modern building. Let's start with a seminar room, with a typical seminar room of the modern building. You see that it is quite typical for these kind of learning environments that the rooms have floor to ceiling height glazings. So we have a quite big glazing portions on the facade. You can also imagine the very dominant sun protection system outside the building on the facade. And you can see the concrete surfaces on walls and ceilings that are quite in contrast with those dark violet acoustic panels that are also visible here. So these are basically the main characteristics of learning spaces in the modern part of the building, and compared to this, a typical seminar room in the old part of the building. So ceilings and walls basically are cream colored. We have a usage of natural and, so to speak, warm materials like wood and other things. Typical are also the light green frames of of doors and windows. And a typical feature are also those kind of box type windows that you can see on the right-hand side of the picture. Yeah, so some impressions of the spatial environment. The student group that we accompanied during the module week consisted of 14 persons with an average age of about 38 years. We had a quite balanced gender ratio, and most of our students had a university degree, and most of them also were employed. Just a few of them were self-employed. What we also did was, what we also conducted was measurements of building climatic characteristics, such as room temperature and CO2 concentration of the air. You can see that the room temperature in the seminar room, displayed here by the thick lines, was very stable and very constant between 22 or 23 degrees Celsius, and also the CO2 concentration in the air, measured by ppm, parts per million, reached mainly a level of about 600 ppm, which is, according to norms and regulations, a quite good value. Just in some cases, we reached some peaks, but these peaks could be mitigated quite easily by ventilation, by opening up the windows and things like this. Yeah, as Tina already mentioned, in the framework of the module, a survey was conducted for the reason to assess the requirements of students for the learning environment and to what extent these requirements are fulfilled. Expectations of certain room characteristics were ranked in a range from unimportant to very important. And you can see on the diagram that the most important features of the learning environments are air quality, also a modern room equipment, but also the availability of certain spaces, for example, for regeneration or for group work, or also for individual exchanges. Having a look at the satisfaction range from not fulfilled to perfectly fulfilled, we can register that there are some gaps between expectations and fulfillment displayed here. And I think that these are very important informations that we have to hand over to the administration of our university to improve the supply of space on the campus. To explore the students' perception of different spaces and of the campus as a whole, as Tina already mentioned, walking interviews were conducted. So the members of our interdisciplinary scientific staff of the project, they walked along with the students and visited some spaces and rooms, for example, the Mensa or outdoor spaces or seminar rooms, and were discussing about their expectations, about their preferences, and things like this. To keep the discussion going, we developed some guiding questions. For example, have you ever been to this place? Or what have you done at this place? And I think that this was a very useful approach, this type of methodology. And I think Tina will now present the results of our findings that could be gained in the framework of the walking interviews. Tina, it's up to you.
Yeah, thank you, Gregor. Yeah, considering the time, I will just give you some quick flashlights regarding the outcome of these walking interviews. For the seminar rooms, what was quite interesting is that, for example, the seminar rooms in the historic buildings were perceived much more positively by the students participating in the case study. And they used, for example, terms like these rooms have flair, they have a pleasant atmosphere, or they are charming. The library spaces, that was also quite interesting for me, I must confess. They were hardly used at all by the participants of our case study. And this is because we don't have a lot of spaces in the library suited for communication or for group work or exchange. And most of our students during the module weeks, they stay in hotel rooms, usually near the campus. And of course, they prefer to use these hotel rooms for individual learning activities. We have some lounge and working areas inside the campus buildings for students to be used for group works or discussions. And these we found were used quite frequently by the participants of the case study. They also gave us some information which spatial characteristics they found were important for these working areas. For example, what was mentioned quite often was their need or their wish for comfortable furniture. And interestingly, many of them stated that they preferred standing height tables for discussions or group work. Regarding the campus outdoor spaces, we found that the use of the different outdoor spaces and also the preferences of the students regarding the outdoor spaces were very diverse. But many of them expressed a wish for more shaded places with suitable outdoor furniture to be used for example, group work or also individual exchange. Yes, and the catering areas on the campus, we have a Mensa there, we have a cafe and some restaurants. And these are used by the students mainly for the consumption of food and drinks and not for group work or learning activities, and also quite seldom for informal exchange or networking. They prefer to go to restaurants or cafes outside the campus for these activities. And reasons they gave for this were limited opening hours, poor acoustics, too much commotion, and a lack of retreat in these campus catering areas. The walking interviews also gave us some insight about the reasons why our students liked or disliked places on the campus for their use, or why they used or did not use them. Often they stated that places they liked, they perceived as friendly or inviting or cozy, and reasons why they liked these places were often, for example, brightness and the availability of daylight. You can see here some other reasons or some other positive mentions in connection to spatial characteristics. Places they did not like to use were often perceived as cool or kind of industrial. A reason they gave very often is that these places were noisy or had poor acoustic, and often they just did not use places because there was no suitable furniture there. For example, lack of seating or unsuitable seating, and also quite often the lack of retreat or privacy. Students also expressed some wishes, and most frequent wishes were, I mentioned this before, suitable outdoor furniture with shading, and also more places on the campus indoors and outdoors for group work or collaborative tasks and individual exchange. Now, to sum it up, I think we can say that we found that the design of formal and informal campus learning spaces is actually essential for positive learners' experience. We found that a variation of structured and unstructured spaces for different kinds of learning activities is important, and maybe especially important for adult learners. And we expect that the experiences and expectations of adult learners might be different to those of traditional students. And this is where we see a need for further research and where we want to go deeper into in our research in the future. Yes, and this topic, in which way the pandemic and digital transformation has changed not only how we learn, but also very much where we learn, I will keep for the next presentation. And yeah, I hope to see you soon, maybe next time in physical space and not in virtual space. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina and
Gregor.
Gregor, sorry. Anyone has questions to them? Well, definitely I am impressed about the learning space you have. We have really similar situations only in new buildings. In our university, we mainly locate in old buildings. And well, now there are new areas where some really learning spaces for students are created, really, where they can group work and then do this kind of work. So this is something we need to do. But I was, well, if Kevin has a question, please.
Yes, thank you. I find that really interesting. This is what I want to ask you. Where do you think the expectations of what a university looks like and feels like come from? What are the expectations that these mature students have, and where do those expectations come from? If I may share something, in England, certainly there is a popular culture expectation that university buildings are old, and therefore new university buildings are not as like a university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And you might be, I guess you're right if you expect that the expectations have a lot to do with the cultural situation. And yeah, maybe especially in Austria, you know, we have quite some very old universities as well, like the Vienna University of Vienna or Technical University in Vienna. I think it's I think it's a combination of personal of maybe the personal learning biography and also what kind of cultural impression you get from media and so on. And yes, I think that that's just my personal opinion, but I think that the expectations of adult learners have a lot to do with their personal life experience and of course also with their professional experience. Yeah, we can see that our students have really quite different expectations to the learning environment. For example, regarding it to be comfortable or to be very effective in supporting them in their learning activities.
Okay, thank you. Seamus has a question, please.
It's a comment, really, an anecdotal comment. Was interesting when I was listening to your presentation. A number of years ago, we ran a program for the credit union movement here in Ireland for their staff because of a requirement by the central bank for upgrading of their staff. And initially we ran the program in hotels. And because these were outreach programs throughout the country, and we got a lot of complaints, a huge number of complaints from the students about the facilities, and the soup was cold, the room wasn't warm enough, all kinds of things like this. And we then shifted to other educational institutions that we rented the rooms from around the country, and we got no further complaints. Although the facilities were much poorer in the educational facilities, the students seemed to accept that they were prepared to accept poorer facilities in educational institutions rather than in hotels, which I thought was interesting. And once we moved away from the hotels, we had no more complaints about the facilities.
Yeah, this is a very interesting comment. This is also that keeps us, or that a situation that we have to deal with very often. We are architects basically, and when the talk is about is about room heating or temperature and things like this, and the more complex the building system is, the higher the expectations are, and probably universities and hotels and things like this could be comparable with this. But what we also did, and I agree 100% with you about your talkings about the cold soup and things like this. We also conducted a group discussions, which was quite intensive and quite long. And we talked about the spatial environment, and we talked about designs and things like this. But when one colleague mentioned that there is something not working on the toilet, or the toilet is not that proper as it should be, you can start the discussions that is endless. And this is nothing, this has basically nothing to do with the architecture. This is really just a kind of feature or a kind of the thing that everybody is connected to this, and yeah, you can start a discussion about it with related to the expectations of the university. And when you have clean toilets, you are basically safe. This is really super.
Okay, thank you, Gregor. We have also one question in chat. Are there also possibilities for art activities?
What exactly do you mean by art activities?
Well, maybe Johan, you would like to comment your question? Maybe
yes.
painting, yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm working at an art university in Holland, and I think that for the surroundings or for physical surroundings, there must be art somewhere, maybe some statues, or they can relax doing maybe painting or making music or something like that. It makes the surroundings much better, I think.
Yeah, actually we do have quite a lot of art installations on the campus and also inside the buildings, and some of them are quite interesting. I'm not sure if you're referring now to the art installations connected to the campus and the buildings, or places for doing arts or being creative.
Yeah, I think the last ones, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, Gregor and me, we are at the Department for Building Environment, and we are architects, and we do have courses for architects or programs. And we do also have programs for different arts related programs.
No, but I think, Tina, may I just interrupt here?
Yeah.
I think Johan wanted to ask if we have space to conduct some art.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I just know audio marks to make music, you know, if it's possible, that if you get the audio marks, it's a big hall that we always use for concert and things like this. But I don't know any other place physically that you can practice or conduct art. Maybe you know.
I think there's quite little space related or specially dedicated for doing arts. Gregor?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think that the incentives on the university to be artistically active are quite poor.
Oh, it's a pity, because science and art has a lot of common, and it can influence each other very good, I think.
We have actually programs in museum archives, museum studies, and music management, and music archives as well. But yeah, and we also have an Erasmus Mundus in culture and art. Is part of the cultural and artistic work, but yeah, the spaces are limited for conducting art.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I will interrupt this discussion here. So, because I would like to give the floor to Filiz again. She already stepped in. She has a second presentation about working on the concept of research literacy in academic continuing education, a systematic review about that. So please take a floor.
Thank you very much, Ülle. Yeah, I mean, you heard, I think, quite enough about my university. So I'm from the same university with Tina and Gregor. And
just to interrupt, could you put on this presentation mode?
Yes, I'm trying, but my computer is very slow right now. Okay, can you see it now?
We see also your comments on the next slide.
Okay, this is interesting because the problem is I have two screens, and the presentation is on the other screen.
Now you close it.
Okay.
Maybe you just, Filiz, can you share the screen again and choose the screen where you have the presentation?
Okay, good idea. Let's try. Oh, very good. Yes, thank you, Tina. It's still the same.
No, it's now full screen. Yeah.
Okay, great. Great, thank you very much. It never happened before like this. Normally it was always working. Okay, yeah, so I'm Filiz Aschenberger. I work at the Danube University Krems at the Department for Continuing Education Research and Educational Technologies. And my area of research is lifelong learning, adult education, and academic continuing education. Actually, we were together with Tina and Gregor in the project. They just presented the results. So it's also very, the learning environment is also becoming our, at least my area of research also now, because we plan and we had some other publications and we plan new projects on that. So this project, this presentation, the paper that I want to present is part of another project. It's called Research Literacy in Continuing Education Realize. It's also an faculty interdepartmental project that we cooperated with our colleagues from Wissen's Knowledge Management. And it's funded by our ministry. And the idea was to develop, or to work on, at least to, if we can develop a concept of academic literacy in continuing education, and also to determine the needs of the students and lecturers in academic continuing education regarding research literacy. And we conducted the study in 3 steps. The first step was the conceptual and theoretical analysis. So this systematic review is part of this first step, because we also conducted an analysis of the policy documents and we look at the literature. And then we conducted the systematic review to be able to create our definition, our own definition, to be used in the needs assessment, because after this step, we collected data first from our students as the second step. And then at the third step, we collected data from other universities in Austria who has university continuing education programs. So before I start my part into the research part, I would like to ask you, what is literacy for you? When it comes to your mind when I say literacy, and how many different types of literacy you can count right now? Who can give me some examples? What it comes to your mind first, for example, when I say literacy, what is it for you?
Well, digital literacy.
Sorry, what did you say?
Digital.
Digital literacy, yeah.
Digital, yeah.
This is very popular these days. True. What else?
Cultural literacy.
Cultural literacy. Great. Anyone else?
The ball? Who has the idea, please? Up.
Just come in. You can just pop up, and you don't need to raise your hand or anything. That's it? Digital and cultural literacy? Is it what you can count? Really? Come on, you know more than that.
There are languages.
Language, okay.
Numerics.
Numeracy, true. What else?
Literacy for assessment.
Okay, but for whom? For teachers, if you're talking about, or for like?
I'm thinking about for students mainly, but for teachers as well.
You mean like testing? How to take the test and stuff. Great. Okay, then I will show you what has been on the, sorry, there was someone.
Filiz, what about music notes? Is this also a type of literacy, for example?
Yes, exactly. That's also, I didn't put it here, but if you Google just a little bit about, different types of literacies, you will see a really great variety and different types of literacy. So here I just took the ones that are really mostly mentioned. Of course, reading and writing, this is the basic literacy, actually the classical meaning of literacy as we know of, starting from the beginning, and the numerical literacy together hand in hand. And then, of course, we have information literacy, financial literacy, media literacy, civic literacy, like Ülle said, digital literacy. This is very up in days. Computer or technology literacy, cultural, multicultural literacy. So this is, you can differentiate or not. And school literacy, that is about also being ready for school, for example, knowing how to behave in a school, what are the rules of the school, and emotional literacy, for example, and of course, music, and how to read the music note. So this is also a great type of literacy. So in this, so many different types of literacies, I would like to today talk about, of course, the research literacy. So research literacy, as we looked into it, it actually starts at the later phases of our formal education system. So in some certain countries, they start already in the higher education, the lycée part, the secondary education, but the main focus that really that research literacy, we see research literacy as part of the core curriculum and what we do at the university level. And in the academic continuing education, because we talk about academic continuing education, we focuses on academic literacy or research literacy as well, because our students, they have to conduct their master thesis and conduct the research and write their master thesis to be able to complete their degrees. And Tina and Gregor mentioned a little bit about our student profile. So they are mainly adults working full-time or part-time, and they are actually have a good expertise in what they're doing. So they have already developed a lot of competences, but research literacy may not be one of them, especially for those students who are coming from a non-traditional background. That's how we define them. Students who are not having an academic degree, a bachelor degree, or even students who do not have what we call in Austria matura or abitur, this maturation examination after the secondary school. So they are coming from, some of them are coming from even with the vocational education, vocational technical education without any academic education. So it is part of our really core part of our curriculums at the master's level at our university. But in general, how we can see literacy is it's more about the, as you saw, the different types of literacies, it's more about the procedural knowledge. So it's the ability to do something as opposed to the declarative knowledge, knowing of something, because literacy means, okay, you know something, but you can perform this thing. So you know how to read and write, and you show it by reading and writing. Or if you have media literacy, for example, you know what it means. Or information literacy, that means that you can use the information, you know how to critically differentiate between the valid information and not valid information, etc. And for the academic literacy, this includes the skills and the competences on how to conduct research and produce academic research and academic texts. So I will come to that at the end of the presentation. So how do we end it up? But the technology is changing, so the text formats are changing. There are new text and new literacies in this sense as well. So in terms of the academic literacy also, because before there were only text writing. So you were writing essays, you were writing articles, you were writing your master thesis, for example, or your dissertation. But now there are different forms of academic text, like PowerPoint presentations, like blogs, like books, book chapters. So it is becoming more and more wider with the use or the support of the technology. So what we saw before we started with our preliminary analysis, we saw that there is really almost no research in the academic continuing area, and that describes us what is academic literacy, what is research literacy, and how we can study that. So there was also no framework. So we wanted to go for it. And to identify, so with this part of the study, we wanted to identify the concepts and area of competences related to research literacy specifically for academic continuing education, in order to substantiate and further develop a draft concept of research literacy in academic continuing education. That's, as I mentioned before. So I will move quickly to methodology. As you saw from the title, this is a systematic literature review. And we follow the Prisma. If you are not familiar with the Prisma, this is one of the ways that you can conduct a systematic review. There are different approaches. So we chose Prisma approach. It's called Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. it's a well-set, well-founded approach that it gives a very clear direction, telling what to do and what not to do. But we are slightly separating from that at the end, because we didn't do a quality appraisal, because we wanted to look at the theoretical and conceptual aspects concerning the research literacy in continuing education, so that we focused on that part. So these are the steps that you can conduct a systematic review according to Prisma guidelines. So you start with identifying a research question or questions that will guide the review. That's very important. Then you identify your keyword for search, then the databases and criteria for inclusion, because you have to define beforehand how you will choose the studies. Then you do the selection of the studies. Then, of course, you do the data extraction, reviewing the publications. And the last step is reporting the results. So the research questions that we followed mainly were related to the definitions, the theoretical framework, the types of methodologies that were used to study research literacy, and which disciplines and the fields and actors deals with the questions of research literacy. And also we looked at the soft skills competencies that were studied or that can be ascribed to research literacy. So these are our search terms. We use two groups of search terms, level of education 1 and level of education 1A, because we wanted to keep the alternative as the higher education, university education, in case we don't have anything from the first group, continuing education. And the second group is about the different terms, different alternatives for the research literacy. And this was our search strategy and the results that we received from our search. We use Web of Science as our database because, and with all databases options, because we saw that Web of Science has almost everything that the other databases are covering. So this was a very good coverage. And as you see in the first search, we had the continuing education terms, academic continuing education, and the research literacy terms. And in the second one, we had the university, college, graduate education, and then the research literacy terms. At the end, after the records are retrieved and the abstract screening, we ended up 72 studies or publications that we included for full text screening. The inclusion criteria were defined as the topic, recency, so the dates, the age range, the sample, of course, the studies conducted for whom, and language, and the research type or research base according to methodology, and the type of the publication. So we, of course, focused on research literacy, academic literacy studies, adult education, postgraduate education, or higher education at the university level, but we didn't focus on study skills, learning skills, lifelong learning, academic writing, information literacy. So we excluded studies with focus on these topics. And we looked at the last 5 years. The age range was, of course, the continuing education, university students, postgraduate education. We only could focus on English studies. We included all empirical studies. And we looked almost everything regarding the type of publication, peer review, book chapters, project reports, thesis, conference proceedings. So this is the process of the study selection. As you saw the numbers, this 100, I think it was like 857 studies were screened at the first hand for titles, according to their titles, and then we started the abstract screening. After the abstract screening, we had 111 studies, and then we retrieved their full text. And after the full text, we had 72 that we started for data extraction. So now some results the first part of our results for dealing with the study characteristics. We wanted to see where the studies are coming from, when they were conducted, and what types of publications they are. So as you can see, in terms of the geographical location, South Africa had, interestingly, several publications. So there is a kind of actually research tradition there regarding research literacy and academic literacy. And one of the reasons they have an assessment that is required for university entrance. And they do lots of studies also using this assessment system, for example. And then we have Australia, UK, Germany, Spain, and the rest, every country had one publication. Most of the publications came from 2018 and 2019, and they were mainly peer-reviewed articles. Also, there was a conference, two conference proceedings, a commentary, and a study book, a real study book for research literacy. Regarding the methodological aspects of the studies, they were mainly qualitative studies using interviews, for example. And then there were quantitative studies using a survey, the questionnaires, and then there were some mixed method studies. As you can see in the data collection methods, like I said, it was mainly interviews and questionnaires, but there are also some curriculum development and curriculum analysis or assessment tests studies as well. And like I said, that most of the assessment tests studies or studies based on the assessment of the tests and the quality of the test or the validity of the test, they're coming from South Africa. So the second group is about the sub-skills. So you see the frequencies of sub-competencies mentioned in the publications, or we can say the skills that can be ascribed to research literacy. The most frequently mentioned one was the writing skills. Then there's information literacy, reading, of course, visual literacy, and the least mentions were the digital media and oral literacy, academic speaking. And not all of them actually defined, and not all of the studies define sub-skills. So that's why the numbers do not add up, because some of them also mentioned some reading and writing sometimes were mentioned together, for example, or analyzed together. Okay, so in terms of the theoretical framework, there were two dominant frameworks identified in the literature. The first one is called New Literacy Studies or Academic Literacies Movement. And here we see Lea and Street, this 1998 publication, quite much. And also followed by Lilius and Scout. So this was the first one. The second one is the discourses approach. It's also called academic socialization model, which is originated from Bourdieu and Passeron's academic discourse, habitus, and competence discussion. So here, for example, within this model, Guy's article is the most cited one. And here the idea is that you learn, so academic literacy or research literacy is part of the academic culture, and you come to learn to acquire these as part of your acculturation at the university. And the other theoretical frameworks that were adapted or cited, let's say the studies, it's from Van Dijk and Wiedemann, they're from South Africa. It's also used a lot. There's also Wingate, the research skill development framework, or theory of systematic functional linguistics, information literacy integration model. There was even self-efficacy theory from Mandura, and social cognitive model of communication competences. Regarding the definitions, that what we wanted to figure out, actually, it was very much in line with the theoretical framework. So the studies used or most of them, let's say, they used the definitions from the theoretical framework they were adapting in the study. Here we see mainly three categories of definitions. The first one is study skills approach. So this is the literacy refers to ability to read text, for example, and write text, so reading and writing mainly. This is called the study skills. The second is, as I mentioned before, the academic socialization approach. So they were defining the using a lot from this academic socialization approach. And then academic literacies approach as the third group of definitions or the theories. And there were other terms as well, also like research literacy, social scientific research competence, or educational research literacy. For example, Gross Opfoch and their friends, they develop educational research literacy, and they have a validated instrument, for example, to measure it only for students studying education, like for teachers, for example, or students studying pedagogy. So they created a separate educational research literacy in the area. So, as for conclusion, of course, we couldn't find any really single study that looks at academic literacy in academic continuing education. And there is also in the continuing education, not only continuing education, but also in the higher education, there is a lack of comprehensive and holistic concept of academic literacy. I will show you now what I mean a little bit. And then, especially with the global trends and changes, it's altering ways of production and the research, how we conduct research and what we produce as a result of research. It's important to provide an up-to-date definition of academic literacy and the right set of skills and competences. So based on these findings, also the other review of the policy documents and main documents from like OECD and World Bank and UNESCO, we designed our own conceptual framework, let's say. And we defined these following groups of skills for the research literacy in academic continuing education: searching skills, ability to search, assess, select academic and vocational documents; reading, ability to read, comprehend, extract information from academic text; writing, of course, to express information, arguments, results in different formats, genres, and different level of complexity; distributing skills, able to present, share, and publish information in different contexts. It includes also conference writing, how to write a conference paper, for example, how to write an abstract for a conference, how to prepare a presentation for an academic conference, and skills actors, and collaborating skills. This is, I think this is a very novel approach, ability to collaborate and co-create texts and publications, because academic world requires more and more cooperation and co-creation processes. So based on our analysis, we also included this as the fifth skill for academic literacy and academic continuing education. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Filiz. Very interesting presentation, definitely. And I would actually like to ask a question to use this last slide or just one previous. Mm-hmm. Do you also thought about analytical skills, or is it just like included in the searching skills?
It is in the searching skills. So.
Okay.
I mean, based on these skills, we developed our questionnaire, and we asked students, how strong do you think you are good on these skills? And we each, they have sub-skills, and in each sub-skill we have items. And if you are interested in, and there will be a full report publication of this project soon. We are waiting for the number, for the ISBN number, and it will be open access. I can share the survey and also our book with those who are interested in. Then you can, I didn't put the whole sub items that we use for the skills here, but for each sub skill, we have a set of items that we ask students what kind of skills or sub skills, I would say, that we mean. Yeah.
Okay. Here is also a question from Johan again. do you try to connect the way students write nowadays, blogs and vlogs, with critical scientific writing?
So how do we connect it to academic writing? Is that the question? Because I don't see the chat. Okay, so I think, for example, the first time when in one of my university courses, I was asked to write an opt-out paper, an opinion paper for a website, for policy analysis website, for example. And this was, it was partly a blog. So I think this is now, especially after Corona, actually, we ask our students to do everything online, now more or less. So this is becoming, I also gave my students, we created a blog, for example, and they were writing their diaries, you know, learning journals and things like this, and it was all online. So I think it's becoming part of academic context, and it will be, even after the Corona time, when we go back to normal, I don't know what kind of normal it will be, but what we've learned up to now, the experience that we gained in online teaching and the assessment will stay with us, I think. At least some of it will stay with us. And it is, of course, this in the distributing skills, we have this, using different types of digital skills as well, because it's partly related to digital skills. So you cannot really separate from them each other like black and white. To be able to produce these texts, you have to know the digital skills. You have to know how to use the internet. You have to know how to use the website production, things like that. So yeah, it is becoming more and more related. So we are. I saw it also with my students myself this and last semester, and also I see with other colleagues that we are really getting away from just using text and essays as evaluation or assessment, multiple choice, to moving more creative and collaborative digital ways of assessment and evaluation processes, also for teaching the content. Yeah.
Okay, there is Christina wants to ask a question. Please be quite quick, because we have already Kevin's time.
Oh, sorry.
Just last question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. 2 questions are, the first one is, could we see the questionnaire? Because this would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could you send it to us, or, I mean,
yeah, I can actually, I don't know if we contacted Boku, Christina, but we okay.
Not me personally.
Not you. Okay, sorry then, because we have Klagenfurt, Innsbruck, and FH Linz, Oberösterreich in the last step. I will definitely send it to you, and if you would like to contact, let me know. We have everything ready.
You.
We can do it together. Yeah.
And the assessment, maybe it's interesting for everyone. The one they have in South Africa, is it connected to validation of non-informal learning? Is it
no? It's for exactly for the university entrance students.
Yeah, but in kind of validation of non-formal informal learning, or is it just an
formal? Formal.
Okay.
It's very formal. Yeah, it's very formal. But I can send you also a list of the articles that I included in the review, for example. And then you can see all the studies there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just write me an email. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Filiz. And could you stop your share screen?
Yes, that's a very good question. How I do that now? Because okay, it's in the other screen. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, great.
And now I would like to give the floor to Kevin, and for his presentation about the marginalization of higher level technical courses and the decline of English university continuing education, addressing the united outcomes of policy. So Kevin, please take your floor.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, colleagues. And I'm speaking to you, as I told some of you earlier, from Manchester in the north of England, but my university is the University of Huddersfield, which is between Manchester and Leeds, the heart of what was the Industrial Revolution. So the marginalization of higher level technical courses and the decline of English university continuing education. What I'm talking about today are the unintended outcomes of policy. So in this paper, I'm examining the reduction of university-based continuing education in England. I have used official statistics to try to explain the very significant drop, the decline in the number of mature students in English universities, remembering that most mature students are part-time. Now, to be clear, by mature student, I mean a student that is starting their course after the age of 21. And in particular, I'm examining how this drop, this very significant decline in the number of mature students, is associated with the decline of students taking higher education courses below bachelor's level. So bachelor's level, level 6, I'm talking about courses at level 4 and level 5. And I end this paper by suggesting how this serious decline might be reversed. So I am presenting this paper as a warning to others who may be tempted to follow England's lead, and also a warning against marginalizing aspects of higher education other than 3-year degrees that may lead to marginalizing university continuing education. And some of my points echo what Professor Komeling talked about this morning. England had good university continuing education. England lost it. So I have 3 broad points to make. First of all, that over the last 25 years, there has been enormous growth in participation on higher education courses in England over the past, let's say, the past quarter century or so, especially on full-time 3-year bachelor's degree courses. Over the past 10 years, there has been a very steep fall in the number of mature students in English higher education. And thirdly, that fall is the unintended result of government policy that simply overlooked higher education students not on full-time bachelor courses, especially those on these higher level, level 4 and 5 technical courses. Now, that decline can be considered in relation to the potential impact on the economy, and I will mention that a little bit later, but here I'm examining this decline primarily as an example of how universities have retreated from continuing education, which marks a significant reduction in the opportunities people have to enter higher education when they are mature. So let me be clear. England is not the United Kingdom. The situation is different in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So I'm focusing on England. England, as I've said here, has transitioned, like many other nations in Europe, has transitioned from having a relatively small, elite higher education system to having a mass system with some of the features of a universal system. English higher education institutions are highly stratified and fiercely hierarchical. These are points I will return to. And perhaps most importantly, the governance of English higher education is marked by, as Andridakis and Masson have said, is marked by a strong, underlying, competitive, market-oriented vision. That is certainly the most important point in what I'll be making today. So let's look at this in some more detail. In 1980, 15% of people under the age of 30 had accessed higher education in England. By 2018, that proportion was nearly 52% overall, and for women, as you can see, nearly 60%. That is a success story, you might argue, for widening participation. Similarly, this is important to note that higher education in England is paid for by loans, repaid by graduates, and the level of graduate debt among borrowers who finished their courses 2 years ago was £40,000. That is equivalent to 46,000 euros. That's the average. And that is more on average than American graduates owe. England is the leader in graduate debt. Yet it's important to remember that higher education has grown overall, and participation amongst the young people, that is starting their courses below the age of 21, is much wider, but it is contracting for mature students. As the number of students on 3-year degree courses has grown quickly, the number on higher level technical courses, that's level 4 and 5, have dropped significantly. So, just some figures to give you some background. In 2016-17, these technical courses accounted for just 3% of all higher education students in England. That is a fall over the 10 years to 2018 of 54%. An incredible fall in the number of these mature students. In the early 1960s, just 2 generations ago, this provision accounted for over half of all higher education in England. Now, to compare this to other countries, this means that England has got half the proportion of these students on high-level technical courses, high-level higher education technical courses, half the level as Germany and half the level of the OECD average. Now, this decline has implications for university continuing education, and I would argue for social justice in England, because the demographic of these part-time students is very different to that of full-time students. Students on higher level technical courses tend to be part-time. Part-time students tend to be, as I argued here, in work, mature, female. They tend to be carers for children or elderly relatives. They tend to be less mobile than younger full-time students. In other words, higher level technical education is university continuing education. And as this graph shows, this is from government figures released earlier this year, you can see the number of part-timers starting higher education in England has fallen off a cliff especially since about 2011. Now, let me be clear. No government and no minister intended this to happen. No minister intended the contraction either in higher level technical education or the decline in part-time delivery. But it is very largely the consequence of government policy made with little understanding of these higher education courses that used to recruit so many part-time students. This has come about, this is a result of the unintended consequences of policy. This is a threat to social mobility. John Butcher has argued that this decline encompasses threats to social mobility, a narrowing of access to higher education, and a diminution of opportunities for the most disadvantaged adults in society. The consequences, Butcher argues, are catastrophic for those individuals denied a chance to transform their lives and those of their families through part-time study. Now, maybe John Butcher is overstating that. Nonetheless, for the individuals involved, this could be catastrophic. And more recently, this decline in level 4 and 5 courses has been recognized as a threat to economic development. Field, in his study of this area, making comparisons between England and elsewhere, he said, the face of the English education and training system is marked by a curious absence, a missing middle of mid-level occupationally relevant skills and qualifications. And what Zaidi and all have argued, there is an acute shortage of technician-level STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which can be attributed to an undersupply of people with level 3 to 5 vocational qualifications over the last 20 years. In other words, as a result of the decline of these level 4 and 5 courses. Now, let me reiterate it. Nobody intended this to happen. It is the consequence of a system that was a policy that was imposed on higher education in England. let's look at this in more detail. How has this disastrous decline in part-time continuing education in universities occurred? And here I argue there are three main causes. The first one is this: the failure of the market system of higher education, and specifically the introduction of very high fees that was associated with the marketization of university education in England. We know mature students are resistant to debt. They will not take out debt by and large. And as Callender and Thompson have argued, the decline in part-time numbers in universities shows that for many, the alternative to loans is not paying up front, it's deciding study is not for them. So rather than pay loans, they just don't study. And remember, many of those would-be part-time students would have gone on to those higher level technical courses at level 4 and 5 as they had done in the past. The second reason is also associated with marketization, and in particular, how competition between universities has led to a highly stratified system. And in a highly stratified system, relative advantage is crucial, as Martinson has argued. In England's stratified higher education system, there is disadvantage in being associated with these low-level higher education courses. Let me put this another way. England is a highly unequal society, and that inequality is reproduced in education, including higher education. Middle-class parents with high social and cultural capital want their children to attend high-status universities. So, for universities wishing to maintain or gain high status, low-level courses, such as those I've described at level 4 and 5, may actually be a disadvantage in the education marketplace. So for universities competing with each other, as they do in this stratified hierarchy, there is a good reason not to run level 4 and 5 courses. And the third reason is also associated with this number 2. Associated with that is the favouring of 3-year full-time bachelor courses by government and universities. As I've said here, politicians have little personal experience of part-time courses. Most politicians went to school, then full-time university, maybe a master's, and then into politics. They have not experienced part-time study. And similarly, English universities like the financial stability of these 3-year full-time courses. And we know that unless universities are required to do different in this higher education market, they will run these more financially attractive 3-year full-time courses. That is simply what has happened. So, as I've said, the government did not intend these things, but the imposition of a market within higher education in England has marginalized all but 3-year full-time courses. So my argument in a nutshell is this: the reasons for the decline in university continuing education, in particular level 4 and 5 courses, are built in to how higher education in England is organised on a market-oriented, competitive basis. This requires universities to jostle for position, and it marginalises higher technical courses as full-time bachelor's degrees are valorised. Now, I'm glad to say that this is beginning to be recognised to some extent, even by some government advisors, but competition remains king in English higher education. So, what can be done? Well, I think it's important that universities are incentivized to attract part-time mature students, especially on these level 4 and 5 courses. And that means thinking about the scheduling of sessions, more evening courses, Saturday day schools, for example, and it means looking at looking beyond 3-year full-time degree courses, and it means learning from the kind of things that Christina and Gregor were talking about earlier. Secondly, incentivize employers to sponsor employees on higher level technical courses, which used to happen in the past. Today, employers are incentivized to run apprenticeships. So the idea of incentivizing employers to do this is not outlandish. It has happened. But there's no doubt that the most important thing to do is to reduce drastically or even remove fees from level 4 and 5 courses, because loans have simply not worked. They have put people off. Now, there's no doubt that this last step, at least in England, is the most controversial. But as I've said, it is the most crucial step if the government is as serious as it says to expand these courses. In other words, it has to address the failings of its own policy. So finally, then, what I am saying is this: that continuing education in universities, including and indeed especially higher level technical courses, can open up routes to knowledge and understanding that can transform lives. But for too many potential mature students in England, these routes remain closed. And the lessons for others, I would say, are these. Do not let full-time bachelor degrees marginalize all other types of higher education, because if you do that, university continuing education will contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Does anyone have questions right now?
Could I just make a comment?
Christina has raised. Yeah, please. Christina, you're...
Filiz was first, but anyway, I just want to ask if micro-credentials are playing a role, if they are discussed right now, and if they would fit into a holistic approach, like if you collect different micro-credentials, which would be worse together for one bachelor or one master degree. Is it being discussed now?
It has not been discussed here, though I know it is being discussed in Australia. Personally, I am not a fan of micro-credentials. I think that they are highly reductive in terms of knowledge and even in terms of skills, actually, but they're not being discussed within the English context at the moment. So as I say, England often learns from Australia, so it may come in, but not at the moment, no. But
they're highly discussed at the European level right now, so...
well, England is oblivious and has been for 30 years in terms of education policy, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Seamus, you had a question?
Yeah, it was a comment, really. I know you're probably oblivious to the neighboring island as well, but
not me.
I know, I'm joking. There have been two very successful programs, one longer term called Springboard. I'm not sure if you're aware of this program. And to be honest, I was skeptical of it myself when it came out maybe 10 years or so ago now, where this was after the 2008 catastrophe, or around that time, where the government put money specifically into initially to allow people who were unemployed retrain into other areas. And they were the sorts of programs that you were talking about in technical areas, but they extended it to people returning to work. And this, I think, was especially useful for women, particularly, who had been carers, and they could come into the programs. And also they extended it in more recent years to people who are currently in employment, because that wasn't in the first round of it. But I suppose just to, I mean, of course, it's not as big a scheme or whatever as it needs to be. But in a sense, I could just speak for my own university. This year's ones were announced yesterday, so it was €1 million worth of income for the university. So it's not an insubstantial amount of money either. So it does incentivize the universities to engage in that space. And as a program, I think it might be worth looking at in terms of saying, you know, is this something that could work in England? Because there isn't any reason why something similar couldn't.
Thank you, Seamus. That's really interesting. Thank you. I will follow that up.
Okay, Filiz.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. It was really interesting because right now in Austria, we have a huge discussion about our new university law. They're changing it and they're bringing a new concept as continuing education bachelor programs. So up to now, we didn't have continuing education bachelor programs. We had only master's programs and academic certificate, the expertise programs. So, I mean, what you say is that they are decreasing in England. So, and now with us, they're bringing it up and they will make it more difficult as far as what we understood as people working in this area. That will be more difficult for people to actually get into these programs. So my question is, do you have, because I know what we call non-traditional student is different than how you define non-traditional students, because our non-traditional students are in Danube University, those who do not have any kind of academic education, no bachelor, no university entrance examination. Do you have this type of permeability for your students in England for the continuing education programs, or they have to have their A levels?
No, they don't have to have A levels.
Okay.
There are various ways of having, you can do an access course, for example, in a further education college. You can have it's possible in some universities to have your experience acknowledged as a way of helping you to enter university. So on paper, there is that kind of permeability. I think that what is important, what I want to try and get over is that although these things exist on paper, university continuing education exists in England on paper, but when you have a marketized system, it becomes utterly marginalized because the market predominates and means that universities compete over 3-year degrees. So whether it exists or not, whether we talk about first in family students, whether we talk about non-traditional students, the reality is those students are marginalized. And I think that therefore it's important to see that unless universities are required to do something in a market system, they will simply attract as many 3-year students, 19-year-olds as they can. So we do have that permeability by law, but in practice, it does not exist.
Thank you.
Okay. We have more questions. I actually would like to ask Kevin how popular is the sponsoring this 4th-5th level education in England? I know that in some countries in Europe, it's in certain areas it's quite popular. In Estonia, for example, IT education is just like sponsored by different IT establishment or banks or so on. But how it's in England?
Well, the government is very keen to expand apprenticeships and what referred to as higher level or degree apprenticeships. Now, that has not yet taken off. Indeed, the number of apprenticeships are contracting. And obviously, COVID has affected that. So after COVID, we will be able to see what's happening. But the kind of tradition that there was of employers sponsoring level 4 and 5 students to do day release courses, that has very largely evaporated. That has very largely gone. But as I said, the government is seeking to incentivize apprenticeships, some of which include university education. But we have, in England, we have lost a lot of ground. So we are behind where we were 10 years ago. So even just to make up that ground will take a lot of work.
Yeah, Christina?
Just to understand, level 4 and 5, it's the EQF level, right?
It's what, sorry?
For the EQF level, 4 and 5.
Yeah.
But couldn't you have like short courses for the level 6 and 7 also, or 5 and 6? I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could also have like 20 ECDS courses on the level 7. I mean, like we have, or 6, but they're like short courses and they would help people to upskill and reskill.
I'm not concerned about the level of the course, really. What I'm saying is what has happened is level 4 and 5 courses were a significant part of higher education, and they have contracted. It could have been part-time level 6 and 7 I was looking at. It's just that is a specific illustration of what happens in a marketized system where 3-year degrees begin to dominate. So we can offer level 7 part-time, level 6 part-time. We do offer those things part-time, but they are marginalized because of the system. So I think it's not a question of what we offer as universities. It's a question of competition between universities that leads to what we have in England.
Okay, hopefully this will be solved, and then it will be a higher level again, because I know that at least in Estonia, this English and then British education is still very popular, and many students try to go to have higher education in England. Well, we have actually managed with our time. I would like all participants to just like turn on microphones and give an applause to every presenter, and to yourself as well, to manage to listen all these presentations.
Thank you.